Hey, this is Block 7, The Greatest Generation, Section 3, War Without the United States, with the section beginning with America's decision. Nobody in the world expected France to fall in 6 weeks. Everyone kind of expected a replay of the first time around. But now, all of a sudden, as we saw on the last map, Britain was sitting there alone, without the equipment for its army, outnumbered, outgunned, outfought by the Germans. And that presented the United States with quite a decision to make. That the United States had to decide whether it was going to kind of leave Britain to its fate and hunker down in the Western Hemisphere and build up its Navy and its Air Force and its Army to kind of fight Hitler in the Western Hemisphere, or should they take all of that effort and send it across the ocean to help out Great Britain? Both sides have their advocates. There's American isolationists are called America Firsters, and they start an organization called America First. And their argument is that the United States' interests are not the interests of Great Britain. Great Britain's interests are not the interests of the United States. Besides, Great Britain's going to lose anyway. Their slogan is, "The Yanks are not coming," playing off the famous song from World War I. And they say, yeah, let's build up our military, but let's build up our military to defend our own shores, not the shores of Great Britain, who are going to lose anyway. Their most popular kind of celebrity spokesman is Charles Lindbergh, the famous pilot hero who is widely respected in the United States. But there's many others. Henry Ford is an America Firster. Joseph Kennedy, who's actually the ambassador to England, is an America Firster. He argues that the British are weeks away from collapse and surrender, and that to send anything over to Great Britain at this point would only have it fall into German hands. Joseph Kennedy is most famous, of course, as for being the father of President John Kennedy, who would come to power, in the 1960 election. These isolationists lead a large chunk of the American population focused in the Midwest and in the Mountain West that have been isolationists their entire lives, and these people are the people who lead that charge. On the other hand, President Roosevelt is not an America Firster. President Roosevelt believes that the United States should do all they can do to help Britain, and what he says is we should help Britain with all aid short of war. That the success of Hitler's army shocked the United States into reality. And when Americans looked over across the ocean, Great Britain was the only country that had a constitutional government left. That all of Europe, with the exception of England, was ruled by one dictator or one authoritarian or another. More prosaically, Roosevelt and many Americans felt that if Britain falls, that's a direct threat to the United States. If the Germans were to gain control of the British fleet, if the Germans were to gain control of British colonies, if the Germans were to gain control of the Royal Air Force and use that for their own ends, that could be a direct threat to the physical safety of the United States, protected by the British fleet, plus the German fleet, by the Royal Air Force, plus the Luftwaffe. That is a force that could literally make its way across the ocean and invade New York City, in theory. Britain's shipyards, Britain's factories, Britain's workforce, all fighting for the Germans, shocks Americans into reality. Many Americans expect Britain to surrender, but Churchill's oratory, Churchill's speeches are not just aimed at a British audience. Churchill is always talking to the Americans. Churchill is half American. His mother was an American. Lived in the Bronx. She was in New York City, an American New Yorker, Churchill's mother. And always felt a very close affinity to the United States, Churchill did. And when he promises Britain will never surrender and will never parley, will never negotiate with the Germans, that kind of gives Americans hope. And then when the British do so well in the Battle of Britain and stave off invasion, most Americans become convinced that maybe Britain can hang on. And if Britain can hang on, the United States ought to help them. FDR takes this public sentiment and asks for a massive military spending bill in 1940. Congress is asked by the president for huge fleets of airplanes, a massive two-ocean navy, where the American Navy in the Atlantic and the American Navy in the Pacific will each, independent of each other, be the largest navy in the world. $37 billion in military spending, which was more than the cost of World War I, plus the New Deal combined. After a lot of debate, Congress passes these measures. Then Roosevelt orders something like 40,000 planes, 30,000 tanks, 10 battleships, 20 aircraft carriers, and Congress says, okay, 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 and starts funding these things. Then on September the 6th, 1940, at the height of the Battle of Britain, Congress passes a conscription act, the first peacetime conscription act in American history. That starting with September 6th, 1940, men will be called up to the colors, called up to join the army, and they will be forced to join whether they are interested in joining or not. So as the Battle of Britain is ongoing, what you get is Congress approving these vast increases in military spending, military production, and the beginning of an American army that one day might be used to fight Hitler.